CS Candid Leader Insights, the podcast where we dive into the world of customer success with industry leaders. I'm your host, Irina Cismas, and today I'm joined by Gillian Stringer, Senior Client Partner at Enrich, an account-based marketing platform helping B2B teams engage high-value buyers. Gillian, I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Irina. That was such a brilliant introduction. I'm really excited to be here and get into the conversation today.
I want to go back to the roots. You
Mhm.
started in hands-on CS roles, and now you are a senior client partner. When
Mhm.
you look back, what's changed most in how you show up with customers?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. I would say what has changed most is the recognition of the need for change management. So in my previous CS roles, I was working within organizations where the tool wasn't there wasn't necessarily a theory behind the tool, right? So now in the landscape I'm in with account-based marketing, I'm primarily working with marketing teams, but I need to champion this idea that marketing and sales teams can work together, that they can be aligned, that there doesn't need to be animosity. We need to involve CRO, CMO, CEO, and it's not enough to just enable on the platform, right? I can't just set you up with a login and check in for our first QBR. I really need to hold the hands of my customers, first of all, truly understand their organization, where they are,
Mhm.
and where we're trying to get to. And the success of Enrich really hinges on the success of the business. If they don't hit their revenue goals, it doesn't matter how many accounts we engage on Enrich, it's irrelevant. So that change management piece, I'd say, wasn't a part of my day to day when I first started my career. And I'm glad for it because I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I wouldn't have known where to start. So it's gone from more of like I'm a person who's really good at explaining technical things quite simply and getting you up and running on the platform to and befitting for my job title. Now I am your partner. I'm your partner in this. We're working alongside each other, and your individual KPIs and business goals are just important to me as, I don't know, the last time you signed in to Enrich.
We'll talk more about that partner label and what's
Yeah.
really the difference. But now
Okay.
I want to tackle I want to ask you in your career when you were handling this traditional, let's call it CS part, how do you think
Mm.
about growth or expansion, if at all? Was this part of
Mm.
your mental model back then or not really?
I'd say it was, but it wasn't in a customer centric way.
Mhm.
So I wasn't thinking about expansion or growth from the lens of if I keep creating value, I will create recurring revenue. I was thinking about expansion or growth in the very banal sense of I had a CRO at the time who was like, you guys need to be more, what's the word? You need to be more commercial. You need to be more commercial. You need to be more commercial. And I took that and I was just like trying to figure out, like, first of all, what does that mean? And how can I like extract money, like more money from my customers? Like, how can I get the contract value up? Like, how can I get them to buy this new feature? But I wasn't really thinking about needs-based selling and really understanding what are the goals of the company I'm working with and how does this complement it. So I'd say I was going into conversations trying to sell features, which is oftentimes very unsuccessful unless you have a amazing product and technical team who build features that you can just sell off the bat without really understanding where the customer is. So it was in my mind, but it was coming from a place of pressure to be more commercial as a CS function after not being commercial actually for quite a long time, or commercially minded.
Speaking about this pressure that you felt back in your
Mm.
days, I think there is still a lot of tension in CS around stepping closer to growth, sales, revenue conversation. In your
Yeah.
experience, what do CS leaders tend to misunderstand about that shift?
It's a very interesting question. I think there is definitely this juxtaposition, right, between CS and sales. and between like being commercially driven and like adding value or supporting your customer and holding your customer's hands. I don't know if there's anything I can say that I think CS leaders as a whole misunderstand, but I can definitely speak to my own misunderstanding around sales. My barrier to being more commercial with my customers was I'm not a salesperson. That was my, I'm not a salesperson, and that was my stance. But I worked with a really effective CRO at the time who he was watching my calls and everything, and he was like, you are a salesperson, right? You are going and you're selling the value of this tool every single time you meet with your customers. Every single time you're explaining to them why this is necessary, why they should keep going. And any CSM can speak to the fact that it's not a case of they sign the contract and you go through all your QBRs, it's all bells and whistles, and then you renew, right? You have multiple points within the customer life cycle where maybe you have a change in champion, maybe things are just not going well, things are breaking, the tool is not what they expected it to be. And in every single one of those conversations, you're selling. So I think it maybe in some senses can boil down to, at least for me, a fundamental misunderstanding about what sales is. I think if you haven't sat with good account managers, good account executives, you do have this kind of sleazy idea about sales, like you're selling ice to an Eskimo and you're over promising, you're under delivering, you get the contract and that's it, right? They sign the contract and that's it. But actually it is about partnership, and especially in SaaS businesses, we're talking about sometimes 3, 6, 9 month sales cycles. They're building relationships with these people, they're understanding them, and they're helping them out. So I think I had some misconceptions about what it meant to be a salesperson, and therefore I felt like being salesy or being commercial was at odds with what I was already doing. But now I would say it isn't. Yeah, but it's that question.
I want to talk about the motivation because it is connected to what you actually said. I think most sales leaders genuinely want to protect the customer relationship. This is why they don't want to sell it. But in some cases, this might actually backfire.
Yeah.
Have you seen those type of situations? And when do you think that instinct of protecting the relationship actually backfires and doesn't help you?
I think if protecting the relationship is at odds with the growth of the business that you work for, that's a fundamental problem. Right there, we've got a problem, because if the business that you're working for or working with is not growing and you are dedicating time, effort, resources to building features, to enhancing the product, and no one's buying it, you won't have a relationship to protect. So I think that's a fundamental thing, and that is very much part of the misunderstanding, as you said. Like, protecting the relationship should mean that you are delivering maximum value from the tool. And as a CSM, if you're working with leadership that trusts you, you should be able to say, actually, this client, as far as spend goes, as far as like value adds go, they're maxed out. They don't need anything else. And that should be the end of a conversation. There isn't any more growth potential on this account, at least within this renewal cycle. And that shouldn't be a problem. But what I would say is that where I've seen protecting the relationship backfiring is if protecting the relationship is at odds with protecting the integrity of the business that you work for, and protecting like the revenue generation of the business you work for. And I think sometimes as well, it's just a disconnect. Enrich is a very flat organization. I often sit with my CEO, with my CRO. We're looking at the numbers, and I have a real understanding of what it takes for us to maintain the status quo and what it takes for us to grow and why it's necessary for us to grow. I think sometimes, especially at the beginning of my career as a CSM, I didn't have that visibility. So I didn't understand that my CRO is not asking me to be more commercial because he's annoying. We need to grow as a business. Like, we're investing in things, and we need to be able to move that forward, and so on and so forth. And of course, we have all our very important metrics around GRR, ARR. We need to maintain those things. So I think if you don't understand that CS is a part of the revenue function, then you will maintain your relationship with your customer to save face, to be nice, to be friendly, to be kind, so they like you. But then to what end? Because it's business. And your customer understands that. Your customer also works for a business who has the same revenue growth and generation goals, right? So yeah, I think you have to get really clear on the point and the purpose. And also, if then it's still the upsell, cross-sell opportunities are still completely at odds with what your customer actually needs or your customers need, then we have a whole other can of worms, right? Then we have a business that's not customer centric. But if you're working with an organization that is at least trying to be customer centric, maintaining your relationship and meeting your goals as a CSM and helping to meet the goals of the business should not be at odds with each other. Those two things should be like on the same road, essentially.
Your work, I'm very familiar with the account-based part being on the marketing side of things.
Yes.
So I can totally relate to the things that you are saying. And I know that in ABM, timing and relevance matter a lot. So
Yes.
I want to create a link to the CS part now. What do CS
Okay.
teams usually misjudge about when to lean into a bigger conversation with a customer? When is the right moment in the journey? Where
Interesting.
is it do you have a timing also in the CS
Hmm.
or not really?
Timing is important. Timing is important. I think when, as in like month one, month two, month three, is very dependent on the nature of your tool, how your onboarding flow works, like your time to value, and that differs, that varies. But what I can definitely speak to is when it's too late. It's too late when they say they want to churn. I've seen in a lot of organizations this big effort towards churn mitigation. A customer says they want to churn. Oh, and now the CEO wants to meet them, and now the CRO wants to meet them, and now we've got all of these. Oh, what's their last feature request? Let's go check it. Let's get that into the works. Let's sit with the product team. What can we do? I have very rarely seen that go well. Yeah, maybe one or two instances where we've been able to turn things around, but sometimes it's even becomes a question of at what cost, right? If you have a customer that's going to churn and you pull out all the stops and you commit to this individualized customer roadmap with an account that it maybe isn't even enterprise, and you've retained the logo, but like at what cost? And then it becomes like going into that second year, the things that you committed to save that account, can you do them? And if you can't, they're just going to churn again, or you're just going to go through that process again. So yeah, it's definitely too late when the churn risk already comes up. For on a interpersonal level with CSMs, I would say lean in as soon as it feels uncomfortable to do. I think knowing that you have a 12-month contract sometimes, or even a 24-month contract, can be a little bit of a security blanket, right? So if I get on a kickoff call with one of my customers, they've just signed, and in on that first call, they say something where I'm like, so we're in, let me give you my context of ABM. First kickoff, they're talking about lead generation. Oh, we're so excited to generate leads. And I think some part of you can be like, oh, it's fine. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We've got 12 months. Later, our next call, I'll bring it up, or the next one, or I'll get their campaign started and then I'll talk. But no, you have to lean in right there, right then, set the expectation, manage the expectation, have the conversation, and also find out the motivation as well. A lot of the time, you sit with the marketing manager, for example, and they're talking about leads. They're talking about leads because their CMO is talking about leads, and their CMO is talking about leads because their CEO is talking about leads. So oftentimes it's not enough to just have that conversation with the marketing manager. You do actually have to involve those other players and document it and show that you took the steps and just didn't sweep it under the rug and hope it will disappear, because it won't. It won't disappear. It will come back. And if you've got a customer that's like on their P's and Q's, they will say to you, like I said it in the kickoff, our very first call, I told you I wanted to generate leads, and now we're 6 months in and you're telling me I can't generate leads. Why didn't you tell me then? So for me, I think I hinge it on like integrity is important to me. And just in life, if somebody says something that I'm privy to information about, and I know that what they're saying is not true or their goal is not achievable, I would rather nip that in the bud on the kickoff. And if that means that blows things up and we have to involve sales and they're saying like they didn't want to sign and all this type of stuff, then so be it. I'd rather that happen, then get to renewal and talk about foundational level goals that were misaligned with what they wanted to achieve. So I hope I've answered the question well enough. Can't say when, but when it's too late for sure, I can tell you that.
And I want to talk because you said at the renewal, it might be too late in some cases. I'm curious,
Yes.
do you lay down a solid foundation for the customer to renew, or at least to have a high percentage of a renewal rate later on in 12
Yeah.
months or in 24 months? What
Okay.
what does it need to happen in your particular case in order to
Mm.
secure that renewal?
First of all, it starts with sales. It actually starts with new business. So, as oftentimes I see this a lot, like CSMs are excluded from the ICP conversation within businesses, and it's so counterintuitive. It makes no sense. Your team, or some CSMs couldn't even tell you what the ICP is within their business. And it's not a fault of their own. They're just not involved in that conversation. So that's where it starts from. You need a company that has a tried and tested ICP. If you're working with an organization that's spraying and praying, if you're working within an organization that is constantly changing its ICP, it's okay if it's early stage startup, it's to be expected. But later stage, it then becomes a question of, if we take a catch-all approach and we just close deals with anybody who's willing to close a deal with us, that is going to be represented in our churn rate, because CSMs are not magicians, right? We can't take a bad fit customer and just transform things in 12 months. It doesn't work. So there has to be that fundamental alignment about what good looks like. What does a good customer look like for this organization? And when I say ICP, I'm not even just talking about firmographics. It can't just be like 50 to 100 people based in the UK, the US. I'm talking about actual characteristics within the company, the nature of the business that they do, the revenue stage, the growth stage, all these things, right, have to come into play. And it's not on CS to define that, of course. That's what those are for. But CS should be a part of that conversation. So if, your CRO or C-suite senior leadership is talking about ICP, and you have between the CSM function 5 to 10 accounts that fit the ICP that they're talking about, but are terrible customers, something has to give. You have to have a conversation about that. You have to be loud about it. So it starts there. From then, I would say a quality onboarding. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time, and it happens because with CSMs, especially if you have a big book of business, the volumes mean that sometimes you can go into tunnel vision. This is how we do our onboarding. And you get into this like checklist mentality. First we do this, and then we do that, and there's no personalization. You're not taking account for the kind of people that you're working with. I work within organizations where they're super tech savvy. They've been doing digital marketing for ages. They're adding Enrich to their tool stack. They don't need me to show them like how to add a user on the platform, for example. Like, they can work their way around that kind of thing. And then I work with organizations who are doing zero digital marketing, right? And Enrich is the be all and end all as far as digital marketing. They need a lot more hand holding. So tailoring your onboarding to the kind of customer you're working with, because a poor onboarding experience almost guarantees churn. And then they're just waiting to give you notice. They won't tell you, but they're just waiting. So making sure the onboarding is good, and then having the incremental goals, right? So Enrich is a really interesting tool in that obviously we're trying to impact revenue. Typical sales cycle within the businesses that we're working with is about 9 to 12 months. I need to be talking to you about renewal at 6 months. So if I paint the picture that the only way that you can succeed with Enrich is if you have a closed won deal that was influenced by the ads that you have run on Enrich, I'm shooting myself in the foot, because that is probably not going to happen before the 6 month mark. So you need to be really clear on, what does success look like at 3 months? What does it look like at 6 months? What does it look like at 9 months? And if that needs to change, you need to lead that conversation. And that's how I would say, like, you can never guarantee renewal, but it can put you on a pretty good course if you have that kind of structure.
I'm curious, what helped you get comfortable owning outcomes and not just delivery without feeling like you are compromising the relationship with your customers?
Bullying, no, I'm joking, not bullying, but just pressure. I started off as a customer success associate, I think, for a long time. And then I went to a CSM, and then I became a senior CSM. I'd say the transition from CSM to senior CSM was quite steep in that now maybe especially when you start speaking to, I'm just being honest, like sales leadership, they're tougher. They're not, you can't say, oh, I don't know why they're churning and I really tried my best. That's not gonna fly. So yeah, I think honestly, like just pressure, where I realize if I want to progress in my career, I need to own these outcomes. I need to be bold. I need to have the uncomfortable conversations. And churn is okay. Everywhere I've worked, churn is fine if you can forecast it. If you can't forecast your churn, then you're not in control of the account. You don't know what's going on with the account. If it's a month before they're supposed to renew and you're like, oh, they said they're not going to continue, then it's, so what have you been doing and how did you not know that? It can still happen, right? Because there can be wild cards. But yeah, taking ownership is something that I think initially I was forced to do. And then it became like I took it in my stride and I started to enjoy it because I mean, I think any CSM can testify to getting an email from a client to say, oh, we're really sorry, we're not going to be continuing. And you didn't know. It's horrible. It's a horrible experience. I don't wish it on anyone. So if I can control the narrative a bit more and feel more confident and look at my book of business and be able to say, these are my renewals this quarter, this person's not renewing, this person's not renewing, this person is, just puts you on better footing and you're not on calls like I'm in an R in it. Yeah, that gets old after a while and makes you not feel great about yourself. So honestly, that's my answer.
How do you build a relationship with the sales team? And how do you make
Mm.
sure that they have your back? Because you need them
Yeah.
in your day-to-day role. You can't, if you ask me, I'm not a CSM, but as a marketer, I know that if at least in B2B organizations, I'm not talking about B2C, I'm not talking about PLG, but in B2B sales-led organization,
Mm.
usually marketing is supporting sales. So if marketing as a team wants to be successful, they need to join forces with sales and they basically need to work in a hybrid environment. And I see it similar to CS. You can't have a successful CS organization if sales and CS doesn't work in sync.
Yeah.
And in many organizations, I see a conflict, as you also mentioned at
Yeah. With my
the beginning. So how do you win them? How do you attract them? How do you
Mhm.
join forces to be successful? What did you do in your case?
I think first of all, I'll be honest, like I feel like salespeople a dream to work with when they are hitting their targets. If they are having success, salespeople like they are collaborative, they're open, they want to learn, they want to grow. But yeah, sales reps that are not hitting their targets, I haven't had any success breaking through to them. So I'm keen to hear from the listeners if they have any insights there. So I do want to set the kind of scene to say I'm talking about reps that are good, like brilliant AEs who are closing millions per quarter. With them in mind, I think that working with sales teams is a great lesson in what I mentioned earlier about adding value on a continuous basis. You need to identify the ways in which you can help them. It really is a scratch my back, I scratch yours type of situations. I jump in on calls with sales reps before the deal is closed. I've been in organizations where CS leadership is trying to protect CS. So they say, you can't have a CSM on your call until the deal is closed. It's not an option. It's not possible. You can't do that. They have to sign the contract before you speak to a CSM. And I actually think it's counterproductive. I've helped my sales team close deals. I have gone on calls with their prospects and I've given them insights, I've given them confidence, especially with prospects that are worried about the onboarding process. They're worried about the level of support, which is a big thing in the ABM space in general, right? Of people buying these super expensive licenses and then they're just forgotten about for 12 months. So really showing like, I'm a real person, I'm going to be here, I'm going to support you every step of the way. Even sometimes saying, I might not be your CSM, but this is how we work. And I think once you've done that 1, 2, 3 times, like why would then that same sales rep close a bad deal and give it to you? Do you know what I mean? Because you have a level of rapport, you have a level of understanding between yourselves where it's like, Gillian's helping me out, so I'm going to help her out by not giving her bad deals. I also think it goes beyond the interpersonal as well. And it's also about the kind of organization you're working in. I've seen sales reps be let go because the deals they close keep churning. And we have to have honest and frank conversations about that. If you've got a CSM and in their book of business, they've had high rate of churn, a majority of that churn comes from one rep. It's not rocket science, is it? What might be going on? So I think having the confidence as a CSM to call that out, obviously not to the rep themselves, to leadership, to sales leadership, and be like, listen, this is a recurring pattern. Maybe I keep getting accounts from this person who they don't understand the platform, they don't understand what they've bought, they've been missold, there's misalignment. It don't feel like you're telling tales. If it's a genuinely repeated thing 5 or more times, and then it boils down to like, how much is CS valued internally? How much is your voice respected? When you raise a concern, is it taken in or is it dismissed? And that goes beyond the interpersonal. So I think it's on 2 levels. The interpersonal is there. If you've never even bothered to like say hi, you know what I mean? Or just even say congrats on a deal being closed, and just building like a normal relationship with someone, how much can you expect that person to help you? But then on the macro level, also within the organization, when you raise a red flag, like what happens next? Not to say that you say, I keep getting churned from this rep deals and they fire the person, of course, but have a conversation. And if you identify misalignment that's like juvenile, right? Reach out to the rep. Hey, let's jump on a quick call. I just want to chat with you. Like a few of your customers have come through. I'm seeing like a bit of a pattern in some information that they're getting. And I just want to have us all on the right course in a nice way. And I think people who want to do well appreciate that kind of thing. Because people do say, oh, reps don't care if their deals churn and stuff like that. But I do think they do. I think they care about that. Because after a while, it looks bad, doesn't it? If you get 1 or 2, of course. But if it's a repeated thing, it's not great. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Last question. You've worked
Okay.
across industries, regions, and you had different roles. What's one assumption about great CS that you no longer believe in?
One assumption about great CS that I no longer believe in. Great CS. Trying to think. What's an assumption that people... I think, and also this kind of reflects into the whole CS being dominated by women. I think like maybe people wouldn't say it like this, but there is this assumption that as a CSM, like might be a bit of a people pleaser, like you might be like very agreeable, actually. Let's say that, very agreeable. That's not right. If you are just like an overall, like just a really agreeable person and like you're just nice to work with, you're just nice, I think you see success to begin with. But if you move into an organization that is trying to grow rapidly and you're dealing with enterprise accounts across regions, like with significant contract value, significant investment, being a nice person, like just agreeable, not a nice person, but being agreeable, it will not lead to your success. It probably will work against you, actually. You have to get comfortable with being firm, honest, and leading very difficult conversations. You have to get comfortable with that.
Gillian, this was such a grounded and honest conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your story and the insights. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and mastering customer success.
Thank you.